Hello and welcome to this episode of the Cloud Gaming Report. I'm Zach, and in this episode we have a lot to talk about. It has been a little while since the last episode of this podcast, so I do have to do a quick apology for that. It seems like that's a bit of a broken record, but things are starting to slow down a little bit in my life, so hopefully I'll be able to establish a more regular schedule for this podcast. I'm thinking every other week because I originally started trying to do it every week, and that's when I started not keeping up with my schedules because some weeks there simply wasn't a lot of news, so I would skip a week. So I'm thinking every other week, and that should give us enough news to have a substantial podcast on that schedule. I'm also thinking about possibly live streaming this in the future. So if you're interested in that, hit me up on Twitter if you're listening to the podcast, or if you're watching on YouTube, just leave that in the comment section below if you'd be interested in a live stream, and hopefully that would help me actually keep the schedule too, in that regard of having a regular live stream for this podcast. Moving on from there, we're going to dive into our first topic, which is about EA's cloud gaming project. It seems like everybody and their sister is starting to get into the world of cloud gaming. We had a lot of news in the last couple months about Google's Project Stream and Microsoft's Project xCloud. I also actually have a video I'm working on right now that goes through all the details we know about Project xCloud. And thanks to Darren, who also hooked me up with GeForce Now, I also have access to Project Stream. So I'll be doing a video about the beta and some of my first impressions and what I think about it and where the project might go in the future. I haven't had a chance to actually test it yet, but that is at the top of my priority list, so I'll be getting that in the very near future. But back on topic, we're talking about EA. They actually have a very cool project name for their project, and it's called Project Atlas. We don't know a lot of details about it right now. It seems like some of these companies like Microsoft with their Project xCloud, they released a video, are just trying to get the word out that they are working on a project, but they don't really have a lot to really showcase at this point in time. With EA, we know that they have 1,000 people dedicated to the project, so there's quite a bit of man or woman power behind this project, so that hopefully will translate to something very cool coming from that. We do know that one focus of the project is going to be AI to provide a more personalized experience. And when I read kind of through the details they released, that is one of the topics or one of the points that wasn't generic that kind of stood out to me. So I don't know exactly what they're going to do with that, but it could have some very interesting implications. If they utilize machine learning, for instance, to provide a more customized AI in terms of the character AI in the games to make a more tailored setup for you. For example, if you're playing an RTS game and commanding an army, they could learn from your actions to make a setup that isn't just harder by giving the AI the ability to produce faster or to have higher health on their units. It could actually make the AI smarter and kind of learn your tactics, forcing you to change how you play the game. Just some cool implications there, and simply because EA has released some good RTS games in the past, and I would love to see them kind of revisit that field, because it seems like it's something that at least isn't as big as it used to be, or maybe I'm just kind of missing the games. But I remember the older Command & Conquer games. One of my favorite games of all time was Battle for Middle-earth. Sadly, that will not be made again because they don't have the license to Lord of the Rings. But anyways, I digress. I'm getting way off topic. But having AI and using that to make a personalized experience could be a very interesting setup. So I'll be very interested to learn more about this as EA releases more details. So that is now on your all's radar, and as well as mine. So hopefully we'll be able to get some more details in the near future about their project. GeForce Now released version 7.2. This gives you the ability to choose your own server location. Previously, this was done simply by a network test. They chose the one with the least latency. Due to how the internet works, though, sometimes that doesn't always work perfectly. For example, maybe you're on kind of like a borderline between two servers, and at the time of the network test, that one server had better latency, but maybe it's not a consistent experience simply due to the way the network is routed, and a different server would provide a better experience for you. So now the power is in your hands. That gives you a little bit more flexibility if you are on a kind of a border zone between two data centers for NVIDIA, or something weird is happening and it thinks you have a lower latency to this one data center that's halfway across the US. So just to allow you a little bit more control over your experience, definitely good news there. They say this is something that only affected a small minority of the users, but it is cool to see NVIDIA listen to their community and give the community tools that they're asking for. So props on NVIDIA for that. Moving on from there, we also have news, once again, kind of going back to the EA thing, that Tencent is entering the cloud gaming market. There is very little details about this too, but they're a China-based company. I don't expect to learn too much about it, and probably will never have the chance to actually test it. But their setup is from the word we're hearing right now. Sorry for trying to throw my words out there, but what we heard so far is that it's going to be using Xeon processors. With the graphics side, it's kind of confusing though, because they're talking about using Intel Iris Pro. I don't know if that's like a baseline experience, and they have some with dedicated graphics. But when I kind of did a little bit of research on this, were some Xeon processors with Intel Iris Pro integrated graphics, but those were several generations ago. And it wasn't a great benchmarking experience. There weren't a lot of benchmarks about it because they were kind of rare to experience, but it didn't have a lot of power. So I don't know how good of a cloud gaming solution it would really be, and maybe the details that have kind of been released aren't true about what is actually going to be made available, since it is a Chinese company and Chinese solution. We might not hear about too much about that here in the US, and some of the details might kind of be fuzzy like that, because that's something that does kind of puzzle me, why they're using Intel Iris Pro for a cloud gaming solution. But maybe that's just something that got lost in translation. But if you heard the word Tencent or the company name Tencent and kind of was trying to remember where you heard that, because I myself was, they have a majority stake in Riot Games, so you might have heard it from there. And where I remember it from is they actually published the PUBG mobile game, so you might have heard about Tencent, even though you're not in China or nearby to China. Moving on from there, we have some updates from Parsec. They have made a lot of the controls for the quality and the bandwidth, and for example, something that is controlled from the host computer now, the client computers no longer have control over that. So those are bandwidth limit, the resolution, the frame rate limit, and H.265 settings are all controlled from the host now, and the client no longer has any control over those settings. They also have released updates for the Android and some improvements there, some general improvements to the keyboard and the mouse support, but also improved controller support, including support for the PS4 controller on Android. Definitely cool news there. Moving on from there and kind of wrapping things up, we have the new games added to GeForce Now in this week, which is actually the past several weeks. We have Grip, Overkill's The Walking Dead, which actually looks like a pretty interesting game. I might try benchmarking that. Leave that in the comments below if you guys want that game benchmarked. The Scroll of Taiwu, Hitman 2, Infliction, Leisure Suit Larry, Wet Dreams Don't Die, Lethal, Legal Blaze, and finally, but not least, Underworld Ascended. So that's pretty much it for this week's episode of the Cloud Gaming Report. And I did say this week's, but it wasn't really a week's episode. But anyways, I digress. Thanks for watching or listening to this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it and got some good information from it. Until next time, Zach out.